Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Give folks a second to be let in. Tonight we're going to be doing having a panel of folks to do a presentation on environmental and climate justice in the Bay Area. My name is Eliana Rubin. I'm the program director at NLG-SF. And during tonight's webinar, you're going to hear from some really incredible local grassroots leaders and environmental justice legal workers about their organizing and their visions for sustainable, equitable, and resilient communities in the Bay Area. The panelists are also going to discuss opportunities for legal support, and we'll open it up to discussion at the end. This panel is actually the first in a series that's designed to be the launch of our new Environmental Justice Committee. So the purpose of the committee is going to be to provide legal support for environmental justice organizing in the Bay, including issues of environmental racism, indigenous land sovereignty, toxic contamination, fire management, air pollution, and the other environmental and climate justice issues that we face here collectively. The committee is also going to be focused on defending environmental justice activists, organizations, and the broader EJ movement against targeting, such as grand juries or like what we saw in the Green Scare. Also to file lawsuits for damages, impact litigation, or class actions that will advance the movement, and to do legal research and action in support of existing EJ campaigns, so PRAs and FOIA requests and other things like that. So we're really in a moment of trying to find and play whatever the best role is for the NLG within the environmental justice movement. And really excited for tonight's webinar to get some of those ideas moving and be in conversation together. I'm going to pass it off to Zsea Bowmani, who was our Wineglass Fellow this past semester and has been working with Greenaction, which is an organization that you'll hear much more about and most of these folks are connected to. And Zsea's work with Greenaction has really been a great example of some of what we want to foster with the launch of this committee. And so you'll get to hear from him as well as all the folks he's been working with tonight. I think that is all I have. Logistics, if you have questions as we're going, please type them into the Q&A. And then what else? I think we'll have a chunk of time at the end. If you have any questions, just not for the panelists, feel free to chat me. And I think that's it. I'll pass it to you, Zsea. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Eliana. Again, my name is Zsea Bowmani, he, him pronouns. Like Eliana said, I've been part of NLG and working with Greenaction, as well as some resident groups or community groups in Bayview, Hunters Point, and focusing on issues there and in Treasure Island, as you'll hear way more about from directly impacted residents. I've been providing legal support for one really important project that's been sort of fast-tracked beyond what I think most community residents are happy with, the India Basin project, which is going to add harmful air pollution, possibly displace residents. And there's a whole host of problems that are going on with this particular development project, which we'll hear more about. But I've been supporting Greenaction with their efforts to try to either make sure this project doesn't harm the community or stop it altogether, because community health should be a priority, and it hasn't been thus far. I want to just briefly introduce our panelists for today, since they really are the stars of today's show, and then I will turn it to them to be able to spend more time talking about what it is that they've been spending time working on and how you all can get involved. So first, I'm starting off with Barklee Sanders, who's a resident in Treasure Island. There are many issues with contamination and other things that have been going on in Treasure Island, and Barklee can share more about the work that's happening there. I also want to introduce to you Sabrina Hall, who is the community organizer and policy advocate with Greenaction. We also have Dalila Adofo, who's a community organizer and the Bayview Hunters Point Community Air Monitoring Project coordinator. And lastly, we have Bradley Angel, who's the executive director of Greenaction. And I will let you, each of them just talk more about themselves and throughout the conversation. I guess I probably should introduce myself a little bit before. I'm, besides doing the NLG, working with the NLG, I'm also a civil rights attorney and legal scholar. I've written about environmental justice, reproductive justice, civil rights, and many other issues. And I've been a member of NLG since I was a law student way back in the day. And I've worked, throughout the country, focusing on uplifting the rights of marginalized groups, LGBTQ folks, and others who the National Lawyers Guild tends to promote and defend against other state actors and private actors. I also teach at Santa Clara University and teaching environmental law and regulation in this quarter. Barklee, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was ready to go. So my name is Barklee Sanders. I'm a Treasure Island resident. I've been here for about 2 years. Before I moved here, I came from the Tenderloin area. And since I moved here, there's been different things that I've found out after the fact in regards to the cleanup here. So once I found out about these things after the fact, I always realized that we should be advocating for people to know about these cleanup activities and just try to bring transparency and certain demands that we'll talk about later. But essentially our community is a community of 60% people of color, priorly homeless, aged out youth. So it's a disenfranchised community that points to a lot of this environmental racism that does happen. And I'm looking forward to bringing more awareness to the current community members, but also getting action from the government to do a full and complete cleanup.
Hi, my
Sabrina,
name is...
do you want to go next?
Sure, thank you, Zsea. My name is Sabrina Hall. I am a Bayview Hunters Point resident. I have stayed here over 30 years. I'm a mother of 4 and a grandmother. I have survived and seen the many plights of the residents here in Bayview Hunters Point, which is also a disadvantaged community. People dying because of, cancer, lung cancers, having breathing problems. We have concrete plants also around here. It's just an array of problems that we will get into later on in the seminar. Thank you for having me.
Hello, my name is Dalila Adofo. I work with Greenaction for Health and Environmental Justice. I am a community organizer, and I'm also a project coordinator for the Marie Harrison Air Monitoring Network, where we're installing 10 air monitors in Bayview Hunters Point so that we can get a better look at the air quality. Thanks for having me.
Great. And hey, everybody. My name is Bradley Angel. I'm the director of Greenaction for Health and Environmental Justice. And really a special thank you to the National Lawyers Guild, not just for hosting this seminar and for helping, but for all the work for all the decades and so many struggles. So really appreciate you. Just real quick about Greenaction. We were founded in late 1997 by grassroots leaders from frontline urban, rural, and indigenous communities throughout California and Arizona. And we're very unique. There's a lot of wonderful groups out there, including us, but we are very unique in that we were founded by grassroots leaders from frontline urban, rural, and indigenous communities. That's who leads our organization in terms of our board of directors. And those are the communities we work in from the Bay Area far and wide. So thank you again.
Great. I guess I'll start sharing the screen now. Oh, the screen should be shared. So yeah, today's presentation is really just to give you an overview of the work that Greenaction's been doing for environmental justice and climate justice in Bayview Hunters Point and Treasure Island. I'll help moderate questions if they pop up, but this is an opportunity for you all to learn about what's been going on, some background information, and then to really dive into what the issues are and what kind of help and resources that are needed in order to make lasting, sustainable, equitable change. So let me know if I need to change the slides, and yeah, we'll get started.
Dalila,
Bradley, you're muted.
Yeah, Dalila, I think we were going to queue up that video to kick it off.
All right, let me do that. Oh, it says.
I'll pause sharing. Let's see. Can you do that? Try it now.
Yes. Okay. Here we go. Oh.
So yeah, there looks like there's an issue with the audio.
Okay, hold on. Sorry, I know how to fix this.
Has been swept underneath the rug for health and environmental justice, Bayview Hunters Point Mothers and Fathers Committee, and I am a representative of the Bayview Hunters Point community as a longtime resident. And I'm here to speak up about the pollution and the corruption and the cover-up and the accountability that our District 10 supervisor and our mayor of San Francisco has obviously looked over and has been swept underneath the rug. We are tired of living in contamination. We are in the middle of a COVID-19 crisis, and we are sheltering in place in contamination on top of all of the fires. I'm tired of our city hiding us like they hide Martin Luther King Street and Golden Gate Park. So as I stand here before you, unapologetically Black, from my light skin tone to my deep dark nappy roots, I want to say Mayor London Breed, I want to say Supervisor Shamon Walton, this needs to be handled. This needs to be stopped. Our children's lives matter. I matter. Your lives matter. We grew up in this neighborhood and we're being booted out by big corporations. How much longer will we stand here and let this happen? Our children can't even go to school, but you put money up for hubs and we're still in contamination. That's right. Nothing has happened. You're still going on building these homes on contaminated radioactive land. That's right. What seems to be the problem? I'm tired of seeing these high-tech corporations or big companies coming and booting me and my family and my friends out. These are our streets. That's right. Why should we be here and left to be poisoned? Because that's what they are doing. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Our people build these streets and we demand respect. That's right. Right now. We demand to clean up. We demand accountability. That's right. We demand them look into Indian Basin, into the shipyard, and give all these people what they need. Reparations is long due to all of us. No matter what color, if you're a resident here in Bayview, you deserve it. Enough is enough. And I'm tired of it. And if you guys can't do that job and you're sitting down there, I know some good folks around me right now to be happy to take your position. Do you understand me? So, in closing remarks, I'm just here once again to speak out and beg. And I'm just tired of our people begging because we've done this for so many years. I demand you look into this. I demand you clean up. I demand you get breathing air filters for all residents around while we force the shelter in place in contamination. Enough is enough.
Amen. All right.
For health and environment.
All right. And then Bradley, if you want to reshare.
Zsea is going to do the
Zsea, sorry.
Through the PowerPoint. So Zsea, you can go to the next slide, and Sabrina, you're going to start it off and unmute.
Okay, not a problem. So I'm Bayview Hunters Point, and this is just a picture postcard of environmental racism, pollution, gentrification, and rising sea levels. Bayview Hunters Point is a predominantly people of color neighborhood located along San Francisco Bay in Southeast San Francisco. Bayview Hunters Point has been the historic dumping ground for dirty industries and the U.S. Navy. The state's Cal Enviro Screen 3.0 confirms that Bayview Hunters Point is one of the communities in the state's most vulnerable to pollution due to environmental, health, and socioeconomic indicators. Next slide. You can go to the next slide, Zsea.
Is it not showing?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Hunters Point Shipyard Superfund site contaminated with radioactive and hazardous waste. Dozens of others contamination sites with many along the San Francisco Bay waterfront. Under-regulated plants at the Port of San Francisco, including 2 concrete plants and Darling Rendering Plant. Southeast Sewage Treatment Plant, ground zero for gentrification promoted by the city, including Lennar San Francisco Shipyard Development and Build LLC's India Basin Mixed Use Project. The freight transportation, distribution, and diesel trucks surrounded by 2 freeways. And I know for sure near Pier 92 and 94, as it was mentioned in the slides, there are these concrete plants that are constantly operating without proper permits. Like the permits take even years to even look into, and the city just let these companies just keep operating. Dust is being built up, debris are piled up like as high as hills. And now the mayor and Governor Newsom has the homeless trailers sitting in Pier 94. So not only are residents of Bayview getting the dust and breathing in all these PMs, now the unsheltered population is sitting up there right in the smack middle of all of this, including Little Darling, the rendering plant, which emits awful smells, especially when it's hot. It's like a processing plant that deals with animals and animal fat. When it's really hot, it stinks really bad. It smells like death. And it should be illegal to even be operating near people, near children, near animals, period. I really wish they would do something about it. Like, as I mentioned in my introduction, I've watched numerous of my friends, family members, activists as well, that's in the EJ fight just die, and still nothing has happened. You can go to the next slide, Zsea. Did you want to take this one over, Dalila, or?
Yeah, so this slide just represents what Cal Enviro Screen has assessed about Bayview Hunters Point. And how you can read these percentages is this is compared to the average of California. So compared to the rest of California, diesel particulate matter is in the 99th percentile, groundwater threats 98, hazardous waste 86, 98% asthma, low birth rate is 99% cardiovascular. So Bayview Hunters Point is on the higher end of this scale. And anybody can go take a look at this map. You can Google it, Cal Enviro Screen 3.0. You can type in any city. So it's a good environmental tool.
Yeah, if I could add on that, and not only is this just important information that validates what the community's been saying forever, but just to put a little more background, because this really goes to the systemic racism and the disparate, disproportionate, and we say illegal impact of pollution and the failure to, allowing plants to operate without proper permits, not cleaning up radioactive toxic waste, things like that. So just a little background: for decades, people in communities from Bayview Hunters Point and Richmond and Oakland and farmer communities and all over the state and Greenaction, communities had always said, hey, we have multiple pollution sources. It's not just one. So when you tell us pollution source number 1 is safe, we look at it, you got to understand people's bodies are up to here in contamination. So even a little bit more. So it's the concept about cumulative impacts. And communities also said, and for years nobody would listen, that it's not just the pollution, it's other health and socioeconomic indicators that combine to make a community and a resident in there more or less vulnerable. And so the fact that our movement, certainly not just Greenaction, but we were very involved, but our movement statewide, the environmental justice movement statewide, got the state of California, who we fight every day around these issues, to actually, through the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, create the CalEnviroScreen screening tool and put it out there. And due to a civil rights settlement that Greenaction and El Pueblo of Kettleman City, a farm worker town in the San Joaquin Valley, with a giant toxic waste dump and many other problems, we reached a federal civil rights settlement with the California EPA and State Department of Toxics 4 years ago. And one of the things they are mandated to do in the federal Title VI civil rights settlement is consider CalEnviroScreen and cumulative impacts in decisions around hazardous waste facilities, except they're not. So I just wanted to give that context and hope it's helpful. And Zsea, next slide, and back to Sabrina.
Okay, this is one of us. This is Greenaction at a protest we were doing, talking about Lennar and stop contaminating, trying to shut down. Speaking about the shipyard and all the contamination, we had a few residents there. We had Gloria Berry there, and a lot of people just speaking about and telling their thoughts on shutting down the shipyard. You could switch the slides there. Oh, Dalila, this is you.
Yes. So Hunters Point Naval Shipyard has been a generational issue in Bayview Hunters Point. It is a Superfund site. It is owned by the U.S. Navy. It was where ships were deconstructed after carrying nuclear material. There was nuclear tests in the Pacific Ocean that a lot of people don't know about. And after those tests, these ships would come back to the naval shipyard in Bayview Hunters Point to be decontaminated and cleaned, which they did not know how to do back in World War II, I believe. So with this, it was shut down. It finally, the shipyard itself is not active. And it has gone kind of between a lot of hands in terms of who's responsible for the cleanup. There was a Tetra Tech who was contracted to clean up the naval shipyard. And it was found that they falsified the majority of their data, allegedly. And so the naval shipyard, to a lot of the residents and to us, remains unclean and remains having radioactive waste. However, before Tetra Tech was, I'll just say, caught for their alleged fraud, they did sell a certain parcel to Lennar, who then did build, I would say, luxury condos. So there are people at this point living on possible radioactive land. And not too long ago, I think it was 2 years, sorry, Bradley, if I get that wrong, 2 years ago, that they actually found a radioactive marker on that land that people live on to this day.
Right, the parcel that was deemed clean, the way the federal Superfund process works is when a parcel, they divided the Superfund site, the Hunters Point Shipyard federal Superfund site, into parcels. And when the Navy and the US EPA and the state cleared one of the parcels, what's called Parcel A, claiming it was clean, they give it to City Hall, who gave it to their buddies at Lennar, and they built on the hill there 400 to 500 pretty upscale luxury homes, great view, right? And swore up and down it couldn't possibly be contaminated, but they never properly tested it. And Greenaction discovered that it was Tetra Tech subsidiary that did the testing, signed off on it, and there was huge pressure. And the state came in because they have jurisdiction over that parcel now that it's not on the federal site. And they did the least possible scanning. Literally, it's like a golf cart with this little piece of equipment. They didn't even dig into the ground, and they found a radioactive a piece of as Dalila said, a deck marker that are used at naval bases and submarines right near some of the new homes. They've never tested under the homes or under the little playground for kids. And the residents sued as well.
Yeah, and you can move on to the next slide, Zsea.
Dalila, if we can just say the last thing, that's, if we can just go back real quick, very important, is part of the plan, even if there was no fraud, if everything had gone according to their plan, which is not adequate, the city, the Navy, and Lennar plan on leaving radioactive waste from atomic bomb tests and radiological secret lab buried at the site by the bay, which threatens subsistence fishers, existing and future residents, not just of Bayview Hunters Point, not just of the shipyard, but throughout the Bay Area. And of course, you know, we know who's affected most. So I just wanted to really, and that's why we really concerned about the sea level rise issue and the confluence of the environmental and climate justice.
Again, which brings us to sea level rise, just some general information about sea level rise. Scientific studies have confirmed that human activity, especially fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, are contributing to climate change. I think probably most of us know that by now. Sea level is projected to rise at least at an additional 11 to 19 inches by 2050 and 39 to 55 inches by 2100.
Can I just add something, Dalila?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, as a resident of Bayview Hunters Point, this really concerns me. Like, even before I got into the EJ, fight, the sea level rising around Bayview Hunters Point, especially since we're surrounded by the bay, it really concerns me because of all the contamination, the toxic waste. I'm thinking, like, if the water rises, it's going to push it onto the land. It might get into our drinking water. I'm not too sure. It also concerns me with gentrification and climate gentrification, meaning I don't know if we're going to be ran out or more people will come over. So this is definitely one of the concerns for me. So I really feel like they should clean it up immediately because climate change is really real. Go ahead, Dalila.
Yeah. And once sea level rises, as you see, the map to the left, this is just a 4-foot sea level rise, and you can already see that some of the land is covered. So imagine that 11 to 19 by 2050. A lot, what you're seeing is the shipyard. That far to the right, in the middle of the bay, that's the shipyard. So that contamination will not only be submerged in water, but you know how water flows, it goes in and out and things like that. It'll bring that contamination to the rest of the community. And that's reality. We can move on to the next slide. So, that's one of the major risks that Bayview Hunters Point is posing from climate change. As we said, it's adjacent to San Francisco Bay. It already suffers health problems. Climate change can only make these things worse and ravage this community even more than it already has been. There are dozens of sites that are contaminated with toxic waste, not just the shipyard. There are brownfields, which is underground storage tanks. There's industries, there's businesses, there's warehouses, auto businesses, and many other, things that works with, metal, chemicals, like we said, rendering plant, Southeast Water Treatment treats the water for the entire San Francisco and a little bit outside. So all of this is not only affecting Bayview today, but it can only get worse with climate change as a reality. You can go next. So a little more on sea level rise, coastal erosion, flooding, shoreline retreat, rising groundwater, which is also something, you know, that we take under consideration, considering there's underground storage tanks full of you-know-what around Bayview Hunters Point. So if you have rising groundwater, that means you're taking whatever is underneath our feet. That is being pushed up. So that's even more exposure. Flooding, Bayview Hunters Point, there's pockets that already flood during rainy season. That can only get worse. Yeah, so there's a lot of threats to Bayview Hunters Point public health. You can continue. Like we said, this is just a condensed list of at-risk sites, shipyard, dozens of contaminated sites along the waterfront, the Southeast Sewage Plant, neighborhoods, redevelopment projects, transportation, wetlands.
Yeah, let me just add to that. Also, I wanted to mention back to like the sewage plant. I just recently moved. I still live in Bayview, but I used to stay directly across the street from the sewage plant. And many residents, whether you live directly right there or not, but just because I stayed right there, it just smells. It reeks of, you know, sewage all the time. My kids used to wake up with migraines, including me. My vehicle would smell like sewage all the time. So I really feel like something, if we're fighting about it and it's wrong, it really concerns me that also you know, people in my community go to jail and that they have to sit right there in the toilet with, you know, with this smell, the same smell that we're out in the open air with. So I really feel like they need to do something about the smell, cover it up, because it's definitely making people sick. Go ahead, Dalila or Bradley, for the next slide. Zsea.
Yeah, go ahead, Bradley.
Oh, should I do this one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so under the radar, but really serious also, in another confluence of the pollution, environmental injustice, systemic racism, and climate and gentrification is the India Basin Mixed Use Project. India Basin is right next to the Shipyard Superfund site. And there's a big plan that unfortunately has been moving forward, not happening yet. Started by a company called Build LLC. Now they have like some India Basin development project name. And the plan is to build approximately 1,400 mostly upscale homes with some commercial development. And the land is contaminated. It's also, the proposals in partnership with San Francisco Recreation and Parks Department, because part of the deal is to clean up and improve the India Basin Shoreline Park and Greenaction and the Bayview Hunters Point Mothers and Fathers Committee. We support that, but we want to see a park truly clean and safe and for existing residents, not rich upscale residents who would move in and contribute to gentrification. The city's own environmental impact report concluded the project would cause significant, unavoidable, ongoing, harmful, and local air pollution forever, not just during construction. And yet, and Greenaction appealed it to the Board of Supervisors. We lost. And so in a city that claims it supports Black Lives Matter and human rights and environmental justice and is supposedly a leader in climate change, we only got one vote on the board. This is about 2 years ago. And adding to insult to injury, the Bay Area Air District, after ignoring our pleas to say something about the air pollution, showed up at the appeals hearing and said it was fine. And I'm hopeful they're about to reverse that in the coming days. On January 20, and one of the problems was we didn't have legal counsel to sue. And we are working on another challenge, more administrative, but one of the important permits coming up is before the state agency, Bay Conservation Development Commission. They have a hearing on January 21st. We've been challenging their, what we think, improper notice, the bias process, how they've tainted it. And, but this is definitely a case that is a big one for big legal needs at this point. So, and and again, from the mayor to the district supervisor, they all think it's just great.
Okay, polluting industries at the Port of San Francisco. There's 2 concrete plants operating at the port without proper permits or public review, emitting significant air pollution. We also have Darling International, a rendering plant, which emits noxious odors for decades that are unhealthy and a nuisance. We have the City, Port, and Bay Area Air Quality Management District, BACMed, allowing these unregulated or under-regulated polluters to continue operating. So as I already mentioned about Little Darling, they burn animal fat or animal pieces. I don't know what it is, but it stinks really bad. It makes you nauseous, makes you want to throw up, makes your head hurt, as well as I've already mentioned the concrete plants. Like, you wouldn't put your kids in the middle of a construction zone. So why do they think it's okay to put it right here in the middle of our homes? So we definitely need help or some type of legal help to get the city to actually follow their own rules of permits. If we wanted to do a protest, they make us go all out to get our permits and city permits or park permits, but they let them operate and pollute us and make us sick, and they do nothing about it.
And I'll just add really quick that our friends at the Golden Gate Environmental Law and Justice Clinic at the Golden Gate Law School have done 2 reports on the concrete plant issue challenging the air district. So a special shout out to Helen Kang and the Golden Gate Law Clinic for that. And if people are interested, we can get you that report as well, those reports. So take it. Next one's there. And Barklee, take it over from here.
So next, do you want to give me an intro? Should I just give an intro to Treasure Island?
Whatever.
Right here.
It's your community. Take it away.
Yeah. So basically, this community, starting around 1994, it used to be a Navy site for them to be part of, like, the World War II. The city basically sold it to the Navy, and then when the Navy left, they're still under development to clean up the island. So roughly about 80% of the island's cleaned up. But the housing units called Site 12 are still technically not cleaned up, but residents still live there. And through a lot of this cleanup and discovery, initially they said that Tetra Tech didn't work here, which they had, and that got found out. And when they did additional scanning and cleanup, they found an additional 800 to 900 items during cleanup. Even though they stated that it was safe and that there was no other contamination. And over time, we've basically just been advocating for more transparency through the cleanup of when it's happening, where it's happening. And when I personally moved here myself about 2 years ago, there was nothing in my lease about these cleanup activities, that it was rated at the same rating as Hunter's Viewpoint, in the sense that it should be considered a Superfund site, and it was not considered one because they were allowing the lower level of it at the state level to take over the cleanup. So when a lot of that information came out, when I moved here, I always thought it was kind of surprising that, as an example, we're not allowed to dig in our backyards. I got a notice on the door when I was trying to essentially just redo my backyard myself. So I've always just advocated for transparency there. And some of the big things that essentially we are asking for is for a complete scan from someone that is not Tetra Tech to be done across the whole entire island. And we want it cleaned up essentially to residential standards, where we're allowed to dig in our backyards, we're allowed to plant things, flowers, food, or other things like that, even after redevelopment, not just normal commercial levels, which is a lower standard. And we are also wanting Treasure Island to be considered a Superfund site because it is rated at a high point where it should be considered one, but because of redevelopment and the powers that be, they wanted to just allow the lower level people in government from the state level to determine that it was not a Superfund site. But essentially, that's one of the big things we're advocating for there. And I'm not sure if there's anything else, if there's other slides.
Yeah, Zsea, if you can go to the next slide.
So essentially, similar, like I was stating to Hunter's Point, Tetra Tech did work here on Treasure Island. They haven't re-examined any of Tetra Tech's work outside as an independent body. And like I was stating, the Superfund list, has a rating that's high enough to put it on the Superfund list, but as part of redevelopment, we perceived that if it was considered a Superfund site, the whole entire island, it would probably cause issues with redevelopment and money there for those rich developers. And because it's a low, mostly people of color, about 60% people of color, aged out youth from foster care, people that were going through rehab and other things are put out here. And it's just a really big, essentially in a way, like a benefit district, similar to Tenderloin. They kind of just push us out here outside the city, even though it's part of the city. And no one can own property here, so we don't have a lot of say of what goes on. It's what happens. And that's a big thing that we're trying to change, because we are part of this community. We have lived here for 20 years, and we feel like we should have a say of how the cleanup works and have a say in how we should be included in the redevelopment plans in itself. And another big thing that is an issue out here, just not on just the chemical cleanup and radioactive cleanup, is power outages. So when the Navy left the island to the city to take over to redevelop, they left the same 100-year-old power grid in place. So over the last 100 years, it has aged, and it was unreliable when it was handed over to the city, but it's became even more unreliable. We've had 165 power outages in the last 20 years. And in the last 2 years, we've had 35 power outages. So we basically have a power outage every 4 to 5 weeks. And when I first moved here myself, there was 7 power outages in 7 weeks, lasting on average about 6 hours. And then the 8th power outage was a 12-hour power outage on Labor Day, about 2 or 3 years ago when I moved here. And once I saw that was going on, it was extremely surprising that even during a global pandemic where the government forces us to stay home or highly recommends us to stay home, they can't even keep the power on, and they don't see any need to, at the very least, provide us backup power, at the very least, upgrade the grid, at the very least, giving us a site that we could go to when the power outages happen. Obviously, a lot of people working from home, students. There's about 300 students that live here that also don't have access to reliable power. And we're Treasure Island, so we are an island, so we are isolated away from the city when these outages happen. It takes support longer to get here. And through a lot of this work that I've been doing around the power outages and raising awareness, people have been scared to speak up about it because it is such a big issue. And people have been retaliated against for speaking up on these different issues, from cleanup to the outages. And we're really just hoping around the cleanup that they retest, that they're more transparent. Like in my example, when I moved here, there's nothing on our leases that told us about this toxic island essentially and what was going on. So I just moved here not knowing. So we need more transparency there. And just even for the developers and other people, like in Hunter's Point, they didn't do a good cleanup and they built houses on top of it. And now that is a big issue just for the developers and the people that live there. So I figured we figure if they're going to redevelop the island, you probably want to do it the right way first. So that way no one has to worry about it going forward. And because we're an island in the middle of the bay, for the same thing in Hunter's Point with the sea level rise, if the sea level does rise, it will affect like groundwater and other things like that we talked about. So we're really just demanding a retesting of the island, a complete cleanup of the island, and just a smooth transition into the new housing that is built for the current residents, because we have been here for roughly about 20 years, and we deserve the same access to housing that anyone else does through redevelopment. And next slide. So this sign is basically, if I go about 10 minutes, or not even 10 minutes, about 5 minutes around the block, you'll basically see these controlled areas that are fenced that have hazardous radioactive signs on them. And there's a few of these sites throughout the island that they're still actively cleaning up. And in some areas, these cleanup areas are literally about 5 to 6 feet away from where residents live. So that's surprising, but also just what we consider just like unsafe that that's happening in general. Next slide.
Yeah, if I could just say about this slide, to echo what this slide, I mean, it's kind of hard to see, but if you squint or have better eyesight than I do, I took this picture about, I've lived in the Bay Area a long time, but I had never kind of gotten the toxic tour of Treasure Island, what we call a toxic tour. And I was given that by Carol Harvey, who's an amazing investigative journalist that's written many stories about Treasure Island for the Bayview newspaper, and one of the residents. And over the years, I've worked over 30 something years now. I've worked literally in hundreds of communities. This is one of the most outrageous things of all time. So literally what you see in this picture is people's backyards, and feet, not yards, from their backyards is radioactive waste. And it's our belief that no human being should live next to or on top of radioactive and toxic waste. But then adding insult to injury, the other side of the fence, and what really, I mean, my jaw dropped. And I've been in, Cancer Alley and just so many, Bayview, Hunters Point, so many other communities, Richmond. This is right up there at the top of outrage. The truck you see was involved in the quote unquote cleanup, and it's right by the bay. And if you look behind the yellow sign there, which is a radioactive sign, and if there's a better picture, you would see essentially a pond of water. They were washing off this truck from a radioactive contamination area. And it's like the size of a small pond. And it's not lined, and it's next to homes where kids live and next to the bay, our San Francisco Bay. And I went right through the gate and tried to get their attention, like, who's minding the store here? What are you guys doing? I'm not an expert, but I've done this for long enough. I know this is completely wrong. And I confronted the State Department of Toxics and the Regional Water Board with this, and they just made excuses. But this goes on, and people still live in situations like this, and it's just criminal.
I agree. And another example of that, some of this capping things that we're talking about for demands. There's communities or rows of townhouses that are here where late last year or middle of last year, they found like a radioactive piece of dirt under someone's front doorstep, and they just basically didn't notify them, took it out, and they've had to tear down other buildings to clean under them. So to point to the things that happened in Hunters Point, where they built housing on top of radioactive cleanup, it's kind of the opposite here, but may happen where if they don't clean it up properly, they're going to just put housing on top of it. But as an example, in our community in Treasure Island, they had to knock down different housing to clean up radioactive stuff that was under that housing, which obviously isn't optimal when people have lived there for 20 years. So in a lot of these scenarios, they consider capping a cleanup, which basically in layman's term means that if it's under the ground, it's considered capped. That could be under pavement, that can be under concrete, and they consider that cleanup. Like, it's better to leave it and cover it up literally than it is to pull it out. They make those determining factors. So we're essentially demanding that they literally don't cover it up and take it out and put it somewhere in safe storage, and do a full retesting and have community oversight here. And a lot of these contaminated sites across the island is where the housing units are. So like going forward, we want to prohibit building of homes or parks near or on top of these sites unless they're considered cleaned up. And in general, unless you moved here before 2011, you don't have as many housing rights as other people, even if you end up living here for 10 to 15 to 20 years until redevelopment's completed. So we want to make sure that the community that has been here for over 20 years has access to affordable housing that is being built here. And essentially we want to stop the gentrification and just support real affordable housing out here. Next slide.
I can read this one, Barklee, if you want, or Bradley, did you want to do the legal assistance?
Yeah, let me run through this, but everybody chime in. And so put this slide together for both Bayview, Hunters Point, and Treasure Island. So one of the, we believe that as you know, many or all of you know that we have laws in this country, and not that civil rights laws have been enforced, and obviously they've been grossly violated forever since the founding of this country. But we've been raising the issue that the actions by the city and county of San Francisco and regional agencies in the state as recipients of state and federal aid, they are prohibited by state civil rights law, Government Code 11135, and Title VI of the U.S. Civil Rights Act. They're prohibited from taking actions that have disparate, harmful, negative impacts on protected classes of people, just like live in the subsidized housing and in Treasure Island and Bayview, Hunters Point residents, low-income, working-class people of color. And so this is something we have been and will escalate our pursuit of around these issues. Stay tuned, and we'd love to talk to Zsea. We've been consulting with Zsea on this, and we have a lot of experience at Greenaction as well. One of the other big categories of need is that we need legal support in permit and other regulatory processes for challenging some of these bad projects, be they polluting projects, gentrification, there are often overlap, including under the California Environmental Quality Act. But also, and I didn't put it in here, but I should have, the city and county of San Francisco has also been violating their own language access ordinance, as well as state and federal language access requirements. And so we continue to try to challenge that. So sometimes, if you look at the documents, for example, around the India Basin mixed use project, it's English only, folks. And that's not okay. For several years, the Golden Gate Environmental Law and Justice Clinic provided legal/technical support, working with Greenaction and the mothers and fathers to submit technical comments about the adequacy of cleanup remedies at the Hunters Point shipyard. The same is true for, in some ways, for Treasure Island. We need help constantly with administrative and legal challenges to improperly permitted and polluting industries support, as well as some of these other projects. Let's see. One of the agencies that, as I mentioned, I think earlier, on January 21st, Bay Conservation and Development Commission is having a hearing on the India Basin mixed use project, but they've been violating their regulatory mandate, which is to protect the Bay from harmful development and comply with environmental justice and, of course, civil rights. And we could sure use some legal help, because I think we've already started challenging even how they noticed and the bias and tainting of this upcoming permit decision. But we need legal help on that. And then last but not least, on the Treasure Island issues, I think Barklee raised, a lot of those issues. Again, legal help around, and there's some unique situations with around the tenants law, protection against retaliation. One of the things we've been talking about is Supervisor Matt Haney at the Board of Supervisors to try to get protection, even an ordinance passed to specifically protect Treasure Island residents from retaliation for speaking out, even though there are theoretically some protections, but we need more. So, there's, from everything you've heard, there's a lot of legal issues and help wanted. So if anybody else wants to chime in, and I think we're pretty quick soon we can go to the questions.
Yeah, did you want me to answer the questions about the Child Care Development Center right now? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So currently there is no Child Care Development Center, but as an example of what was happening there was basically a cap, which is just a cement base that was put over some cleanup. And then they put a Child Care Development Center on top of that cleanup site, or that cleaned up site, with air quotes there. But then they removed it and shut it down because legally it essentially wasn't allowed anymore. And then there used to be a school in general for students on the island, and they also removed that from the island. Not exactly sure on the reasons there, but as the development has moved on through Treasure Island, they have essentially just removed more and more resources from the community. That is a literal island, so it kind of makes it hard for the lives of the residents when we don't have a school, we don't have a childcare daycare center. And that's, I don't know much about the plumes and other things there, so I can't answer that question.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but the testing and analysis that had been done at Treasure Island has been inadequate, and over the last number of years, we worked with whistleblowers, former employees of Tetra Tech, their subsidiary, and who spoke out around the Hunters Point shipyard, fraud that they allege. That I think is pretty much, a couple of Tetra Tech guys ended up in federal prison for this. The federal government's held up further transfers of land at Hunters Point shipyard due to the need for over 4.5 years now to investigate the fraud. But some of these whistleblowers also came out about Treasure Island. And it's why residents, Greenaction, and our allies are demanding full retesting with independent community oversight, both of Treasure Island and the Hunters Point shipyard and adjacent areas. In terms of, let's see, the next question, of other grassroots organizations across the state join your cause to spread awareness. And so the anonymous attendee, I'm not, so the answer, particularly around the Hunters Point shipyard, more and more groups are, speaking out, and our California Environmental Justice Coalition, which is a statewide grassroots community-led environmental justice, the biggest environmental justice coalition in the state, has been supportive. But this summer, the Mothers and Fathers Committee and Greenaction and many allies, and Zsea was involved in helping as well in the National Lawyers Guild, we brought together almost 20 groups for the speak out that you saw Sabrina speaking out. And it was, led by the community and residents. But we had, in addition to Greenaction, we had climate justice organizations, environmental groups, social justice, all joining in. And one of the things we've been doing is linking, really trying to help strengthen the struggle, because we're fighting our own city hall, right? And also working now to support the Treasure Island residents to raise the profile. And I'm glad that's starting to be raised. And we should mention that hopefully in the coming weeks, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors Land Use Committee will finally have a long overdue and recently postponed hearing on contamination at Treasure Island. So we'll let folks know. And the next question is, Greenaction sought legal assistance from the Big Greens from Earth Justice? Answer is yes. Earth Justice represented Greenaction and a group that doesn't exist anymore, Power. They kind of merged into Casa Justa, but great group, both of them. And Earth Justice represented us years ago in suing the city over the environmental impact report for the Hunters Point Shipyard Superfund site. And but Earth Justice hasn't been able, capacity-wise, I guess, really dig in on some of those issues. Although a lawyer, one of our friends who's an attorney at Earth Justice, Nina Robertson, who used to be with the Golden Gate Law Clinic, Nina, as an Earth Justice attorney, continues to work with us in advocacy for full implementation of the Title VI civil rights settlement we achieved a few years ago. But there's just an enormous need for more legal help, research, actual legal representation, et cetera, around the issues in all these communities. And what we shared today, as the Guild's EJ committee, talks to more of our colleagues around the Bay Area, it's a broken record. There's more of this, but certainly Treasure Island and Bayview Hunters Point are, one sense, the tip of the iceberg, but they're, as we said, a picture postcard of environmental racism and injustice.
And I guess kind of following up on that question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bradley. Go ahead, Barklee.
And I just wanted to explain more of the power outage issue here, if that's okay with everyone. So the biggest thing with the power outage thing, along with the cleanup here, is essentially TIDA owns the grid here, and then they hand off the upgrades to the SFPUC. But similar to how PG&E determined that it was not worth it to upgrade the power lines in fire-prone areas, is essentially the same decision power that TIDA has, the Treasure Island Development Authority. They decided, and have said this publicly, that it is not deemed worth it to upgrade the grid, not deemed worth it to provide backup batteries, not deemed worth it to install batteries on the homes and solar. And they just determined that when the development happens, the grid will be upgraded. And an additional point to how injustice it is happening with the outages themselves is there was a new switchgear installed on the island as part of redevelopment, and they have ran a brand new power line up to Yerba Bueno Island past our community that is only going to be there temporarily and will be torn down again. So we have, I have been advocating with other people with the Treasure Island SF poweroutages.com to, at the very least, if you're not going to upgrade the grid over 20 years to provide reliable power to residents, that at the very least they should be deploying just backup batteries to the community provided by the government, because they are saving a significant amount of money by not upgrading the grid. But that doesn't mean over 20 years that we have to deal with 165 power outages. It does not mean, just like with PG&E, that just because TIDA doesn't want to upgrade the grid doesn't mean that they shouldn't. And that's where we've been stuck with TIDA, getting them to deem us worth it to have reliable power, because they are the ultimate decision makers. And I don't know if there's any legal help that we can get there, but that's essentially what we're looking for also with the outages.
Yeah, my comment was going to be that I think what would be super helpful is, when you're in the middle of all of this, you're fighting all these battles, it's hard to sort of step back and take a strategic approach and say, okay, how do we coordinate efforts? How do we do all of this? And I think, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I know when I talk to Bradley, we having some kind of a long-term strategy, coordinated efforts. There's so much overlap between what's going on in Treasure Island and Bayview Hunters Point that having people who have that kind of expertise that can look at, okay, well, here's our game plan and this is how we're going to tackle these issues, I think would help, especially folks with legal background who have been trained to think that way. So not in addition to just filing the paperwork, but also thinking, we don't want to solve one problem, but then another one pops up because we didn't plan ahead of time or recognize the interconnectedness of some of these issues.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, from a strategy perspective, and just as, whether you're talking about environmental justice or housing or, whatever social justice struggle, and I know a lot of, the Guild, the National Lawyers Guild has been involved in the wide range of people struggles since day one, that, as wise activists, right, and being strategic, as Zsea said, how do you find those pressure points that can actually help the immediate situation, but bring about the bigger change? And that's why, we have used and continue to use and have had success with civil rights challenges. And we'll continue to pursue that. In addition to that, though, I think really to the extent we can for Bayview, Hunters Point, for Treasure Island, for similar environmental justice communities in the Bay, adding legal firepower combined with the community organizing and action and, mobilizing and coalition alliance building. That's all important. Tomorrow at noon, Extinction Rebellion and Greenaction are having an online letter writing campaign around some of these issues to the Board of Supervisors. But, the legal help is, we just, for example, as I mentioned earlier, around India Basin, we had no lawyers to challenge what I think was the illegal rejection of our appeal and the illegal approval of a project whose own city's own EIR admits is going to harm people in a community everybody admits is already at risk and harmed. And so, there's a huge need and an opportunity to really bring about systemic change as well.
There was a question about how folks can plug into the letter writing campaign.
Zsea, can we send it? I don't know if Blair is on this webinar right now, but from Extinction Rebellion, but Zsea, can we send that to you and you share it with the participants? I don't have it right in front of me.
Sure. Yeah, so we'll find a way to get it out to those who've registered, whether they were able to attend or listening, if they can check this out before noon tomorrow. You can make that happen.
Yeah, people could also just email me at Bradley, BRADLEY, at greenaction.org, and I'll send you the information directly. Also, if you'd like a copy of the Golden Gate Law Clinic's report or a copy of this PowerPoint, although I'd probably take out the legal assistance part for public circulation, I'd be glad to share that and other information. Dalila, could you mention the Bayview Task Force?
Yeah, so I host a environmental justice task force meeting monthly. It's every third Wednesday. It alternates between 2 to 4, and at this point 5:30 to 7:30, or 5 to 7 because of COVID. And what we talk about is there is identifying violations affecting neighborhoods, which is a tool for Bayview Hunters Point community to submit environmental complaints. So, if there's something in the air that's making their throat feel itchy, if they are seeing illegal dumping, any toxic, paint cans or substances, their water's not right, they can file a complaint to bvhp-ivan.org. And at the EJ Task Force, we go over the complaints that were filed. We go over how they were addressed. If they weren't addressed, what's nice about the EJ Task Force is that it brings together community and government agencies, such as city agencies. We also have Department of Toxic Substance Control come, Air Resources, California Air Resources Board, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, they usually attend. So if there's something that was not addressed, we can address it in that meeting. It's also a space for community resources. So if there's any type of support to Bayview Hunters Point, and people are trying to reach community, they can use that space to present whatever support they're doing. Yeah. So every month, if you need, if you're interested, we do send out notices. We have flyers I can send you. If you're interested, I can send you information. My email is dalila@greenaction.org. That is my email. Feel free to message me if you're interested. Yeah.
There's a question about accessing public records for the air management district and whether there's been issues with that.
Generally, I mean, there's been issues about where there's, the air district is really guilty of a lot of lack of transparency. But I will say they have in their public records department, somebody who's been there a long time, is actually really professional and responsive. So I want to at least acknowledge that person at the air district. Somebody who's actually raised issues there about their treatment of people of color employees, as I understand it. But you know, like all agencies, and you know, Zsea helped us with some Public Records Act requests to the city and county of San Francisco, and they just blow off their, you know, the timeline that they're legally mandated to get response, and you know, not quite responsive. This is an ongoing issue, but again, getting information from these agencies, you know, is really important, and that's another area that legal workers and lawyer attorneys can help, not just Greenaction and Treasure Island residents and Bayview Hunters Point Mothers and Fathers Committee, but other environmental justice and community organizations. That's an area we could always use a little legal help on.
I was also going to ask if maybe you wanted to mention, well, I guess you mentioned like the letter writing campaign, but also would the website be a good place if folks wanted to just do like an easy lift, like maybe get their friends who are non-lawyers involved or other, you know, community members or people who are just interested and want to support, like if they wanted to also get involved in doing some of this work, what would be the best way of finding out information about that?
Again, they can contact us at, you know, either Dalila, myself, Sabrina, you know, Greenaction, Barklee at Treasure Island. You can, again, email us just generically at greenaction@greenaction.org. And if it's about Treasure Island, I'll pass it along to Barklee. He just put his email up. Our website, which has a ton of information and is actually over the next week or two going to be pretty dramatically updated, including the Bayview Hunters Point section. But you can go to greenaction.org and also look at our, we have stuff on our Facebook page, Greenaction for EJ. We have some videos on our YouTube page, Greenaction Justice, I believe it is. On our website, the community page for Bayview Hunters Point has a ton of stuff, actually almost too much. And if you go scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a link to a lot of reports. But we're going to be tightening that up over the next week or two as well. But there's a lot of really important information there.
Yeah, it's similar to me. You can shoot me an email at barkleysanders@gmail.com, and that can put anyone in contact with other residents, like Jeff Klein and some others that have been here longer time than me. Feel free to reach out to me directly. And then for like the power outage stuff, you can check out that website and just reach out to me directly about all of that also.
And just to add, like Bradley and Barklee said, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I always love to collab and give my thoughts and connect people with other residents. Thank you.
And if I could mention one
And
other.
there are a few of my students who I think are also on the call. So if those of you are interested, like I mentioned in class today, feel free to email me or reach out or come during office hours, and we can talk about ways if you want to get involved as well.
Yeah, if I could just add one other thing before Eliana closes out. At the same time as we're doing this tonight, the San Francisco Department of Environment was having a webinar about the San Francisco Climate Action Plan, which they are updating. And some of our allies, including Poder in the Mission District, really important group that many of you probably know, and others are, kind of bringing together our communities to help impact that climate action plan. And I'm sure, like, even if we didn't say much, there'd be some good stuff in there. But what do you know? All the climate action plans that the city of San Francisco has done till now, funny, isn't it not, that they don't even mention. Like a couple of years ago, they had a picture on the cover of their climate action plan of waves breaking over the Embarcadero, except nobody lives there and there's not radioactive waste there. And I asked the director of the Department of Environment, how about a picture of waves crashing on the radioactive and toxic waste contaminated shipyard along the waterfront of the bay? So we're going to really work, and again, there's another area where folks can chime in, to really encourage, pressure, comment to the cities as part of the development of this climate action plan that they must speak out and include a requirement that there be full retesting and full cleanup of radioactive and toxic waste, Bayview, Hunters Point, Treasure Island, and the whole San Francisco waterfront, because it is threatened by climate change, rising sea levels, rising groundwater. But I think that why it's not there is because since going back to Willie Brown and every mayor since then, up to and including the current mayor, totally are in cahoots with the mega corporate developers. So they don't want to highlight that. But that's part of our job to make sure they have to deal with it. So thanks again. Really appreciate you, the National Lawyers Guild.
All right.
Yeah, you want to take over?
Say anything to close up before?
Sure. Well, thank you all. First of all, to the panelists. I know you are always constantly under pressure to get so much work done, and you do stuff across the Bay and throughout the country, and especially on the western side here. So I appreciate you so much for taking this time to just share with us what's going on. But more importantly, we're not just trying to share and extract information from you, right? We really wanted this to be an opportunity for folks, many people who are on the call or webinar today saying that they never knew about this, that they never knew. So many times I hear people say, I had no idea there was a rendering plant smack dab in the middle of the city. And so I wanted this to be an opportunity, and as NLG, we were envisioning this to be a space for you all to rally the troops, right? To get people, let's forget the war analogy. This isn't war. We want to strive for peace. Getting people, mobilizing folks with various capacities and training, legal backgrounds, lawyers, legal professionals, students, residents, concerned citizens, to provide the support that you all need to bring justice to communities who are constantly being neglected, looked over, and ignored. So, on behalf of the work that I've been doing with the NLG, thank you so much for sharing this space. And thank you to the folks who joined this webinar, who were interested, who asked great questions, asking how do we get involved, where do you get more information? I guess Eliana can maybe speak to this too, but we'll try to get information to you, the recording. We'll try to clean up the slides and have this information available as well, so that you can help spread the word, because that's something that's really important. If everybody knows about this, the city can't act like they can ignore it. It's that so often it's the people who they consider powerless that they decide to just keep doing this and letting injustice happen. But if everyone knows about this and puts pressure on the city, they're going to have city and county of San Francisco, they have to make change.
Thank you, Zsea, and thank you so much to all the panelists. That was really powerful, and just to hear your personal and political anecdotes and organizing and the work you're up to. It's a really, devastating reality in the Bay and really internationally when it comes to environmental and climate justice, and to hear the ways that you're coming together and organizing around it is just inspiring and brings some hope, I think, in a time of a lot of helplessness. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And yeah, for participants, like Zsea said, we'll send out the recording, notes, PowerPoints, and all of that. And also, please, if you're not already, get on our newsletter. This is, like I said, the first of a series of webinars that we're going to be putting out. And that is where they'll be announced. You can also follow us on social media and find out that way. And then if you want to get involved in the committee, please email me at eliana@nlgsf.org. I'll put that in the chat in a moment, including some of the things you heard about today. I know there were lots of folks chiming in with different thoughts and ideas. So please feel free to reach out to me or Zsea or anyone who provided their contact information so we can get you plugged in and supporting Greenaction as well. I think that is it. So if there are no other questions, oh, thank you. There's Zsea's email. I'll type in mine. Please do follow up. We're really grateful for your participation tonight, and have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.